Hello and welcome to This Week in Laker Football. It's your weekly look into everything about the West Bloomfield Lakers football team. We'll discuss the most recent game, we'll do a preview of the game ahead, and we'll talk to some players and some coaches to get further insight into these West Bloomfield Lakers football players this year. I'm Tyler Kieft alongside head coach for the West Bloomfield Lakers, Zach Hilbers. Coach, last week your first game at the helm as head coach of the Lakers, 17 years as an assistant, you're a West Bloomfield alum. Take us through that first week from your perspective, leading into that first game and then as you're coaching those 48 minutes.
Well, I guess the 48 minutes went a lot quicker in the moment than I thought it would. And like you can prepare for this and that, and it felt like, they were kind of going quickly, and it's like, oh shoot, this is like that moment that we like planned for and talked about. Like now it's time to make a decision. So I hope it slows down some at some point, as you get more and more familiar with it. All in all, it was actually my mom. She gave me the best advice the night before. She said, just have fun. Like you put so much into this, the kids put so much into it. Just remember it's still a game, and games are best played if you have fun.
As someone that has been in coaching for a while, for people on the outside that aren't familiar with what goes into being a coach, both an assistant and then now as a head coach, how much of a difference is that between being an assistant to being a head coach, and were you expecting that sort of a jump?
I guess I was kind of expecting it, but at the same time, despite knowing that there's a jump and people telling you that there's a big jump, once you still have the weight of all that on you, it's still like, oh my gosh, this is a lot of stuff. And, being an assistant and helping people, I guess, fill in gaps, you become aware of, part of the job. But until it's, your job, you don't realize everything that's behind it. And that's with the last two guys telling me that too, and I believed them. It wasn't like I was like, oh no, it's going to be fine. Like that's just my take on it, I guess.
Coach Zach Hilbers of the West Bloomfield Lakers varsity football team, his first game as head coach, a 22-21 victory at the Xenith Prep Kickoff Classic against Clinton Township Chippewa Valley. And Coach, typically I like to start from start to finish talking about these games, but I think everyone wants to know about that last drive, 70-plus yards, scoring a touchdown, a chance to tie it up, and you call a timeout before the PAT and decide to go for two. Take us through that sequence from having your kicking team come out on the field, using your final timeout, and ultimately that decision to go for two.
First of all, I guess I was just glad we still had it, because we had to use some up to get to that point. As soon as we scored, even before we scored, I talked to some guys in the headsets. Like my thought and my gut said, let's go for two and let's win this right here. And then after we scored, I went to our offensive coordinator. I was like, hey, we're going for it. And he wasn't as confident as I was. So I was like, okay, fine. If he's not confident, like we need everybody on the same page, let's go kick it. And then, it was still on my mind. It was on my mind. And then Coach Jakeway actually came to me, and he was thinking the same thing I was. And that was all I needed to like help me tip the scales and say like, hey, let's go do this thing. Because we had an idea of like the play we wanted to run, which we ended up running. And we think if we get one of our better players the ball in those situations, you're gonna win and lose with them.
Let's speak to that, because the player that scored the winning two-point conversion, Brandon Davis Swain, star defensive end for this team, heading to play at the University of Colorado next fall for Coach Prime, for Deion Sanders. And now this year, having a bigger role on the offensive side. We've talked about this previously. What does he have what does he bring to this offense that is the reason for having him on that side, but also other guys that are switching over to offense? We saw a little bit also of Jameer Benjamin last week and others.
Well, Brandon is he's a special talent, between size and power and athleticism. And we knew that we had to use him as much as we could. And to be honest, the plan was use him a little bit more, but we didn't because of the humidity and the weather. It had been kind of, honestly, a mild August. And then at the night of our first game, it was hot and it was humid. And we needed to make sure that, the kids' bodies were okay. So we pulled him off of some, I guess, offensive packages just to make sure he was fresh. And I'm glad we did, because we needed him, on the last play. But yeah, him and, like you mentioned, Jameer and some of those other guys, we just believe in putting our best guys on the field, and we want to make sure we continue to do that.
Coach Hilbers, last week, really a tale of two defenses out in Detroit at Wayne State. Both teams at times had a lot of offensive firepower, and other times really were shut down. But for the Lakers, the highlight of that offense last week was the passing game. Speak to that and the relationship between Reqez Nance in his senior season, and a younger wide receiver core, but a receiving core with a ton of talent.
Yeah, they're definitely talented, and I think there's a lot of kids out there with a lot to prove, and they think they have a lot to prove because they're talented. Some of them are seniors that have been waiting their turn, and some of them are juniors that as sophomores were in between varsity and JV, and I guess they were waiting their turn too. And right now they're going to start getting more and more opportunities, and we had some kids have really good games week one, which is great, but I know that there's still other ones out there that are still going to be like hungry and working for more, and that's a great thing for us when you have a position group like that that's talented and hungry, because we hope they kind of can push each other and make each other better. And if they can do that and we can get those guys up to speed, I think we can continue to improve.
Nigel Dunton, a big game. Marquise Morris, a big game. A really nice performance, too, from Jaden Allos. And Elijah Durham with a couple of huge plays early in the game and in that final drive down the field to get the Lakers within range to make that 35-yard touchdown pass at the end to Nigel Dunton to make it a one-point game. But also on the other side, that defense last week was stifling, even for a veteran quarterback like Schuster, also a 3-year starter, a offense with tons of firepower. Talk about the play of your defense last week against one of the better teams in the entire state and how that sets the tone for what they have to do out on the field executing every single week.
Yeah, it was fun to say that because I actually, part of the reason we had to play the way we did on offense is because they're really, really good, Chippewa Valley, and they did an excellent job of scheming up and stopping our running game. And on the flip side of it, quarterback's outstanding. He has some weapons out there, a receiver and a running back. I thought those kids were really good players as well. But our defense stepped up, and they had guys that were getting dinged and banged up, and we went deep in the depth chart, and some of those guys had to really tough it out there in the fourth quarter. And I'm really proud of them for kind of rising to that occasion because, we gave up that long touchdown drive at the end, which is, not ideal, obviously, but it's going to happen when you play really good teams. It had been a back and forth game, and they'd finally swung the pendulum that way, and it looked like they had tipped the scales. But we, just had enough left at the end to kind of get it done.
Coach, lasting thoughts from last week, the positives and the negatives, what you're working on in between game one and game two.
Well, there's always mistakes week one. You know what I mean? You get 2 weeks of practice, a couple of them are unpadded, and you get out there and you try to get as much together as you can before you play a game. And so there's always going to be mistakes, and there's always going to be things, I guess, that we can focus on and work on to get better, whether it's finishing tackles on defense, finishing blocks on offense, getting the running game going, which would only help the passing game a little bit more. I mean, we got a lot of stuff that we can clean up, but if you can ever get better and you still won week one, we're very happy, I guess, and grateful to be in that position.
An electric start and out-of-conference play against Chippewa Valley, going back in conference in the OAA, but a cross-division matchup on Friday between the Lakers and the Falcons. Coach Hilbers, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll take a quick break. Later on, we'll come back and talk about that game on Friday with Coach Hilbers. But in between, we'll talk to some of the players, we'll talk to some of the coaching staff, and get a bigger insight into last week's game and the season ahead. Stay tuned. You're watching to your exclusive inside look into West Bloomfield Laker football on This Week in Laker Football. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Here you go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back to This Week in Laker Football, your exclusive look into everything going on with the West Bloomfield Lakers varsity football team. I'm Tyler Kieft, alongside the new defensive coordinator for the West Bloomfield Lakers, Kevin Jakeway, his first season at the helm as defensive coordinator, former linebackers coach for the team, and has also been an assistant head coach with the JV team as well. So Coach Jakeway coming into this season, taking over the defense, some big shoes to fill after many years of head coach Tyrice Grice, and before that being singularly the defensive coordinator. How are you adjusting to this new role on this team?
It's definitely been an adjustment. Coach Grice obviously left me in really good hands with a plethora of talent. He's been a mentor for me since I've really gotten here in 2017. And even throughout this year, he calls me daily. I call him. We're chatting back and forth, bouncing ideas off of him. But yeah, it's an honor. It's a blessing. There are big shoes to fill, but I feel pretty good about the crew that we got. All of my assistants, the talent that we have on the defensive side of the ball, it feels pretty good.
Yeah, it helps to have that kind of talent, especially in your first year running the defense, but also just from a leadership standpoint. Often coaches will say that the leadership that they're providing in the locker room only goes so far as the leadership they have from the players themselves. So having that sort of senior leadership with guys like Jameer and Kari and Montel and Brandon and others across that defense, Xavier Davis, others that have been on this team for years. So much of this defense is upperclassmen that have had years of varsity experience. How does that help you in teaching the younger guys how to play defense in this system, play it with and execute to the expectations of this program, and ultimately be highly competitive against some of the best teams in the state?
Yeah, so the list goes on. Like you said, with those guys, they can, really lead by example in the way that they prepare. So when we're talking about the younger guys that are coming up, some of the sophomores that we have up on varsity, some of the juniors that are moving up to varsity for the first time, they see how those guys prepare, and those guys work so hard, and they're so great at being the leaders that they are. It makes my job easy. I come up with a game plan every week, and we can implement it, whether it's Saturday or Monday, and really just get after it throughout the rest of the week. With those guys being able to just step up and show the younger guys how we do things, makes my job very easy.
Yeah, the week one matchup against Clinton Township Chippewa Valley, a high-powered offense, a veteran offense, a physical line on the offensive side, much like Coach Hilbers talked about with their defensive line. And then this week, a similar situation going into Birmingham Groves against that offense with a lot of veteran talent themselves, and a lot of similar to what West Bloomfield has on the offensive side of the ball, some of the most highly rated college-level talent in the country right here in the state of Michigan in particular. So how do you then prepare you guys for that sort of a matchup? But better yet, how does having those sorts of tests early on in the season, really difficult tests, week one and week two, help your team from the jump?
Yeah, it's good. We've always had the mentality of iron sharpens iron. When you go up against Chippewa Valley, who's a perennial powerhouse, and then you go up against Birmingham Groves week two, who was a state semifinalist last year, it helps us see where we're at. It's a litmus test early on, and I feel good about where we're at. We obviously have a ways to go to achieve all of our season goals. But with all the talent that we do have, whether it's on the line or at the linebacking core, running backs, what have you, we see it every day in practice too. So being able to get after it in practice with some of the best talent in the state, translates easily to Thursday night or Friday night whenever we play our games. Seeing it day in and day out really helps us just prepare. And Chip was, like you said, they had so much talent across the ball, at the skill positions at the line. Groves is the same way, and we know that, and it's not going to get any easier from here. So just seeing it day in and day out it helps us a lot.
Defensive coordinator Kevin Jakeway joining us on This Week in Laker Football. You can watch all of West Bloomfield's football games going forward, beginning this Thursday with their road game against Birmingham Groves right here on Civic Center TV, as well as on our online outlets on our website, civiccentertv.com, and across our social media pages as well. And Coach Jakeway, your experience not just as a linebackers coach for the varsity team previously, but also as an assistant coach on the junior varsity team. Speak to that, because the JV team doesn't doesn't often get the love that it deserves. It doesn't get the attention it deserves. And it is that proving ground for the next level where young players coming up, maybe they see making the JV team, not the varsity team, as a demotion or a sign of underappreciation. But that's really a spot that you can develop into a great player when you get up to the varsity level. So speak to how development plays a role into building this program and better yet, maintaining the level of play this program's known for.
Yeah, I mean, it plays a gigantic role, and having been in that role for 5 years before moving up to the varsity level, I know just how important it is. And it's like you take a look at some of our talent that we've had throughout the years, and one name that just jumps out from last year is Elijah Durham. And Elijah played a lot of time down at JV. He moved up, played some varsity snaps as well. We utilized the fifth quarter rule with him last year. But, that development that he got down on JV from, the great staffs that we have at the freshman JV level, some of those guys are one play away from being moved up. And they know that. We know that. The players on varsity know that. When they do move up, it's go time. And a lot of times because we've, set those building blocks in place, we can make a pretty seamless adjustment to the varsity level, and they're already playing at a pretty high level.
Coach, appreciate you joining us today. Anything else that you'd like to say about your defense, about the identity of this defense in 2023-24?
I'm just excited at where we're at. Like I said, we've got a ways to go. It was by far a good way to start the year, but we were far from where we need to be to reach our ultimate goal, which is obviously a state championship. We're going to keep working day in and day out. And like I said, going up against the offense that we have is going to help us do that. And we're just excited.
A prolific defense, a team that last season allowed opponents to score just 19.5 points per game on average, and off to a hot start already, proving difficult for a high-caliber offense in Chippewa Valley in Week 1. The Lakers take on the Birmingham Groves Falcons Thursday at 7 o'clock. Our pregame show at 6:30 right here on Civic Center TV. We'll take a break on This Week in Laker Football. On the other side, one of those guys that did step up from the JV side, make an immediate impact, and then ended up on the varsity team as a key player for years to come. Reqez Nance, the quarterback, will be on the show after this break. Stay tuned. You're watching and listening to This Week in Laker Football.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
Watch West Bloomfield Lakers football all season long on 89.3 Lakes FM and Civic Center TV. Join Tyler Kieft and Matt Catoni each week for live, in-depth, and exclusive coverage before, during, and after the big game. It's your local high school football team on the road and in your backyard on your home for West Bloomfield Laker football, Civic Center TV, and 89.3 Lakes FM.
Welcome back to This Week in Laker Football, your exclusive look week in and week out at the West Bloomfield Lakers varsity football squad in the 2023-24 season. I'm Tyler Kieft, alongside the Lakers quarterback Reqez Nance in his senior season. And Rick, coming back into this season, in the last couple seasons, not quite what you'd want them to be from an injury perspective, especially last season. You were coming back, had a full season ahead. We were really playing great football. So was the offense as a whole. And then go down with your injury, the way you come back in the playoffs, it's an unfortunate loss in that first game. What's your mindset been over the last several months, getting prepared for this season and coming into this season?
I just been working. Like before, like we was all scattered around. We got together in the weight room before the season. I just got together. Last year was a big loss. I lost my finger. And I just messed up the team a lot, and I'm just coming bigger and better this year.
Yeah, off to a hot start, 14 for 21 passing in Week 1 against Chippewa Valley, including an exciting 79-yard drive at the end of that football game to ultimately bring it within 1 point, and then, of course, the final 2-point conversion brought the Lakers over the hump to win against Chippewa Valley. Your receiving core this year, again, excellent, much like it's been in years past, but really having those weapons. And in particular, in the first week, we saw a really great dynamic between yourself and Elijah Durham, who's coming up to the varsity season full-time this year. Speak to that dynamic between yourself and your receiving core and how that's helped you, especially against a tough team like Chippewa Valley in week 1, really come out and make a strong start on the offensive side.
Yeah, like the week before the game, I told them everybody wasn't going to score. I told them everybody might not have a catch, but all my starting receivers had a catch, so that's what I'm happy with. They were happy with it too. At least we won a game, and they just went with the flow of the game. Elijah scored. He brought us big plays. Kieft drove us down the field. Shout out to Kieft for bringing us down the field. All my receivers can catch. We're just going to have a great year.
Yeah, an incredible catch by Marquise Morris near the end of that game, that final drive. You're running outside the pocket. You throw a ball to him, and the tiniest little thread to get the ball into his hands. He makes a great catch to put the Lakers in range to ultimately score a 35-yard touchdown to Nigel Dunton to bring them within 1 point. And Rick, something that we know about you is you are a dual threat quarterback. You're as dangerous on the ground as you are in the air, but throwing outside the pocket has been something that you've had to work on developing over the last couple of years. That accuracy, that decision making outside the pocket definitely seemed like in week 1 you have taken that step forward. What have you been working on to improve that skill? And of course, now with the receiving core you have, being able to execute on that skill.
I just in practice, we work on the rollout and the receivers going upfield. If you have a deep route and stuff like that, we just work on it a lot, and that's what happened in the game. So whatever you practice, it happens in the game, so you got to be ready for it, and I was ready for it. And my leg is always dangerous, and that's what I'm good at.
Big expectations from this Lakers team in 2023, again ranked amongst the top teams in the entire state and looked at as one of the championship contenders in Division 1, going up against the likes of Chippewa Valley from week 1, also Belleville, the 2-time defending champions. Always someone that's on that list for the Lakers of teams you got to compete with, and that ultimately begins with the leadership in the locker room. You are in your senior season. You've seen the Lakers come close to making it to the title game, seen them play in a title game and win a state championship. So in terms of your locker room presence, what are you saying to your teammates? How are you addressing your teammates about what they need to do week in and week out to play great football for 48 minutes, win games, and ultimately get themselves to Ford Field?
I just let them keep themselves accountable. I be accountable all the time. I tell them get down on the field at the right time. If they don't got nothing to do, get down there early as you can.
Reqez Nance with us, a quarterback for the West Bloomfield Lakers in his senior season last week. Over 200 yards passing, near 300 yards, 281 yards passing, multiple touchdown passes to his wide receivers. Looking for a similar performance in week 2 against Birmingham Groves. But outside of the game of football, off the gridiron, what are some of your favorite activities or your interests?
I just like staying at home playing the game. I don't like being around a lot of crowds. I don't like parties, nothing like that. I just like staying to myself.
Yeah, a reserved guy off the football field, but on the football field, exciting every single play. Reqez Nance, a big game in week 1. Looking forward to seeing what happens in week 2 on the road at Birmingham Groves. Rick, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We'll take a break on This Week in Laker Football. On the other side, we'll talk to head coach Zach Hilbers and preview this week's game, a Thursday night game again this week at Birmingham Groves as they go into OAA cross-division play against the Falcons. Stay tuned. You're watching and listening to This Week in Laker Football.
Hey guys, it's me, Isabella Gomez, filling in for Smokey Bear because he's got more to say than just...
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Like, if you're outside enjoying a barbecue, don't let a hamburger distract you from fire safety. Make sure you aren't dumping your hot coals or ashes onto the ground because that could start a wildfire. So take wildfire prevention seriously and let's save the world one day at a time. Juntos con Smokey Bear, podemos hacerlo. Go to smokeybear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention.
Welcome back to This Week in Laker Football, your exclusive look into your local high school football team, the West Bloomfield Lakers. I'm Tyler Kieft, alongside West Bloomfield Lakers first-year head coach Zach Hilbers, coming off a big win in week 1, an exciting finish. And now you go and play another powerful team in the OAA across division, in the OAA White Division. One of the most consistent teams across the OAA over the last several years. 8 out of the last 10 seasons having won at least 7 games. 2 trips to the state semifinals in the last 5 seasons for Coach Flaherty and the Falcons. What should we know about that team, a team that we haven't seen in a few years?
They're really good too. You know, they're different than who we played week 1, I guess, scheme-wise and personnel-wise. But you know, they're good and they're really physical and point blank, they can beat you. You know what I mean? They're really strong up front. They got some really good athletes, and I don't mean this in a bad way. They have beaten us, I think, with less talented teams. And right now it's one of their more talented teams that has experience winning games too. So they believe in themselves. They think they can get it done. And I know this is a big game for them as well. So, I mean, it is going to be a challenge.
Yeah, a returning starting quarterback, excellent play in the skill positions on the offensive side, and returning 3 offensive linemen too, sets them up really well on the offensive side. And as you said, equally physical on the defensive side of the ball. So what changes does your team need to make, or better yet, what steps forward does your team need to make to be able to compete with that team physically and improve on the offensive side of the ball in areas such as the run game, which you mentioned was a bit of an issue against a solid defense last week, in order to come out victorious on the road in Birmingham?
Well, anytime you play Groves, they very, very rarely beat themselves. So they're going to make you go out there and beat them. And with that, we can't beat ourselves. We can't make mistakes, whether it's turnovers, penalties, or just any of the other mistakes that can happen during a football play in a football game. So we have to be clean. We got to know our assignment, alignment, all the cliches, but it matters against them because they make you earn, I guess, everything. They've traditionally been really hard to run against. I mean, we had Donovan Edwards and Dylan Tatum, and they were hard to run against. So I got to imagine it's going to be the same way. It sure looked like it was week 1 for North Farmington, who Groves played and beat. And, they always bring it. I mean, I played against Coach Flaherty. Like, that's how long he's been there. And I told the guys, like, this is the exact same team. Like, guys intense. The kids, play intense. They play physical, and they make you beat them.
Yeah, Coach Flaherty, 23 years at the helm at Birmingham Groves, and that team last week, a powerful performance at home at their stadium, as they're going to be this week for week number 2, 36-3 victory over North Farmington in week 1. You mentioned Coach Flaherty, his intensity, the identity of that team being so consistent. You having played against his coached teams, and now as a first-year head coach, been around high school football in our local area for as long as you have, as a player, as an assistant coach, and now as a head coach. What have you learned about coaching from being able to observe how Coach Flaherty holds himself and how he coaches that team, or maybe even the conversations you've had coach to coach from those veteran coaches like Flaherty and Coach Bellamy and Grice?
Well, Flair's a great guy. Man, he's a great guy. And, whenever we saw each other in football, it was such an intense, I guess, atmosphere because of the way the game is. And you'll talk and you exchange pleasantries. But we'd always see each other when we coached track as well. And that's when you could actually, talk to the guy and not, I guess, be all wound up in the moment. And, man, he's such a great guy. And you see why they've been so consistent as a program, because he's such, a genuine, consistent person. You know what I mean? And, a lot of people will say that the team's a reflection of the coach, and he's an intense guy, and they play a really intense brand of football. So yeah, he's always been great to me. I got nothing but good things to say about him, and I really, I guess, admire what he's done with Groves.
Coach, before we let you go, you're wearing a shirt today, the Josh E. Levine Foundation. Before we started the show today, you're telling me the special story behind this. It is all about a former West Bloomfield athlete. Tell us about this foundation and how important it is to you.
Yeah, so Josh was, he was here, I should know the year exactly, but it was, 10, 12 years ago. He was a quarterback for us. Great kid, full of life. Was like the kid you see in a movie that, he's captain of the football team. Everybody loves him in the school, just really, really positive. Graduated here, went to U of M as, a team manager and worked with the football program just to stay around the sport. Kind of wanted to graduate college and come back and do what I do and start working in the schools and coaching and stuff. But he died at his around his 22nd birthday in Chicago. And his mother started, I guess, a foundation in his name to kind of raise awareness about the circumstances around his death and how, I guess, to prevent youth from following the same path and everything. And, you know, she's been outstanding to us throughout the years as a program and really as a community. And it's just a good way, I guess, to remember like a really good kid.
At the bottom of your screen right now, we will have a link to the Josh E. Levine Foundation, so you can learn more information about Josh, learn about the foundation, and how you can help them out in their mission going forward. Coach, thank you so much for joining us this week.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
A very exciting matchup coming up on Friday. 7 o'clock kickoff from Falcon Field, newly renovated stadium. You'll be seeing live right here on Civic Center TV. Our pregame show will begin at about 6:30, and then we'll have the kickoff at 7 o'clock, and that full game live for you right here on Civic Center TV, live on the radio on 89.3 Lakes FM, as well as online on our Facebook page, the Facebook page of the West Bloomfield School District, and on our YouTube page as well. For our entire crew at Civic Center TV and the West Bloomfield Lakers football program, I'm Tyler Kieft, alongside head coach Zach Hilbers. This has been This Week in Laker Football. We'll see you soon.